It has to be a fight at every single election cycle. And once we accept that, it becomes easier to recognize that it's okay that every election is the most important election of our lifetimes, because we're prepared to fight every single time. And by the way, we have the numbers. More people showed up in 2020 for Joe Biden than did for Donald Trump. And that included a coalition of longstanding Republicans. It included a coalition of independents. It included a vast number of young people who are voting in numbers that they haven't voted in before. So we have that coalition. Our job is just to make sure that people know that every single time we have to be able to come out and vote, because every single time it's going to be just as important as it was the last time, and democracy will be on the line, but that we have the numbers to protect it.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Today's podcast is a treat for me because I get to have my friend Brian Tyler Cohen on the show. Brian is a progressive YouTuber, political commentator, and an MSNBC contributor. He's also the host of the political podcast No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, which has become a destination for all the top names in politics. In fact, Brian was the first independent content creator to interview the President of the United States. But Brian is also the author of a new book called Shameless, which comes out this week and lays out what he calls the long con of the modern Republican Party. That while the increasingly radical right has been gaslighting us with its lies and artificial slogans and what Brian calls hollow catchphrases, we see an ever-widening gulf between the essential Republican brand and their actual behavior. It's a fabulous book in this all-hands-on-deck time for our country and democracy to break down where we went wrong, and a hopeful call to arms for all of us willing to fight back. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, political commentator, widely successful YouTuber, and MSNBC contributor, Brian Tyler Cohen. Welcome, Brian.
Lee, thank you so much for having me on. I'm, as you know, a very big fan of yours.
Well, the feeling is entirely mutual, my friend. I mean, really appreciate you joining me. I haven't seen you in person since we worked together to help the Democrats in Wisconsin, but you've been so busy. Your YouTube channel just passed 2 million subscribers, which puts you over 6 million subscribers and billions of views across all platforms. You're also busy on MSNBC and doing work with Crooked. And now you have this new book, Shameless. So, I mean, you're a busy guy, right? So tell me what inspired you to write Shameless and what you're hoping people are going to get from it.
Yeah, so I thought Shameless was important in this moment in particular because we are seeing a lot of the failures of politics, of our politicians, of our media kind of have a resurgence here as Donald Trump runs again. And look, a lot of what we saw in 2016 with Donald Trump, you can almost wave off. It's almost permissible, right? But for it to happen again, for the media to be failing to the extent that it's failing again after what we saw with Trumpism from 2017 to 2021 is just completely unacceptable at this point. So I thought it was important to make this book to not only discuss where we're at in terms of what the Republicans' long con is by framing themselves as a political party with, this branding as being pro-Constitution, pro-family values, pro-states' rights, pro-fiscal responsibility, pro-law and order. I mean, the list goes on and on. We've all heard their bumper stickers, right? And in fact, they're not any of those things. And I think the quicker we can expose the reality of who they are, the less legitimacy they'll have in the eyes of people who may not be political freaks like us and stare at this stuff all day, because we get how somebody can look at the Republican Party and hear them beat their chests all day about being the defenders of law and order and how that could work on a lot of people. And so I think the onus is on us to make sure that people know the reality of the landscape that we're living in right now. And I say on us, meaning you and me and other people in the progressive media ecosystem, because we've seen how the both sides media just isn't up to the task. And we're seeing so much of what they did in 2016 repeat itself right now. And so really the onus is on people like us to make sure that Americans are well informed, and it's coming at the right time because people are getting their news from digital media to a degree that they haven't before. And in fact, this digital media space is now reaching more people than linear. And so at this moment where we are now getting more eyeballs from folks around the country and around the world, really, I think it's important to make sure that we're wielding that power responsibly.
Yeah. unlike our MSM counterparts, because, recently Lawrence O'Donnell actually took his own network and other networks to task after they had played a live Trump press conference for an hour and completely skipped the live Kamala Harris Walz rally. They just hadn't played it. And he said, we're doing 2016 all over again, and we cannot be doing that. And I thought whoever wrote Lawrence O'Donnell's contract did us all a favor, because it allowed him to speak truth to power in the seat of power, really. But you write this book kind of from the perspective of what you've been watching as an observer, as an outside observer. You start the book with this story that the Republicans in Congress were basically getting into a fist fight on the floor of the House as they tried to elect their speaker. And you point out how this behavior so clearly shows us, and to quote you directly, that the grand old party has become anything but grand. And I think that that's such an essential moment for us to keep saying this, that this is not normal. You write in the book, and I'm going to quote the book directly, "The professed party of Lincoln, of personal responsibility, of family values, of the Constitution itself, was literally at each other's throats as it failed to accomplish the most basic task expected of a governing majority. Today, it is controlled by a burgeoning extremist faction to whom compromise is unacceptable and chaos is the goal. The responsibility to govern has been replaced by the need to attack, to perform, to obstruct, to provoke. This reality is getting exponentially worse year after year, and as citizens, we're becoming dangerously numb to it." And I think that's the thing. The more you hear it, the more numb we become to it, and we don't realize that this is completely abnormal, and this is not what we should be accepting.
Yeah, and I think the important part to take away is that Republicans basically are doing their level best to break government and to prove to us that government is dysfunctional, that it can't work. And actually, when they engage in these fistfights, literal fistfights on the floor of the House, for example, that actually, we think, oh, look, it's going to show everybody that Republicans are incompetent and dysfunctional and that people shouldn't elect them. That actually redounds to their benefit, because most people aren't going to distinguish, oh, well, that was Mike Rogers and Matt Gaetz. They're just going to say Congress is fucked. Like, none of this works. The government is just steeped in dysfunction, and they're not going to make that distinction about which party it is. And so they're going to say, look, none of this can work. Congress doesn't work. I don't approve of Congress at all. And when you look at what both parties are selling, you have the Republicans who are saying, vote for us because we want to shrink government down because we're telling you it can't work. And by the way, look at all that dysfunction. What they're not telling you is that the dysfunction is the direct result of what they're creating. So they break it, point to the thing that they've just broken as evidence that it can't work, and then present themselves as the party that's going to cut down government. So it's this vicious cycle where they want to help themselves by steeping themselves in dysfunction and hoping that Democrats get caught up in the gears of that. And again, to your point, this is not normal. It can't be normalized. And I think the onus is on us to show that when we have good people in office who believe in the core function of government, that government can work. I give this list all the time when I'm doing my videos because I think A, it's important to promote what Democrats have actually done, and B, I think repetition is important. But Democrats, in just the last 2 years, with the same majority in the House, by the way, as the Republicans have now, were able to pass the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, the Violence Against Women Act, codify marriage equality into federal law, the gun safety law, the infrastructure law, add 16 million jobs, bring unemployment down to a 50-year low. So there is a totally impressive list of accomplishments from when Democrats were in power. And that is the direct result of having people in there who recognize that government can work when you have people in office who believe it can work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. As you know, I have my own book coming out in September, and there's a whole section on it called Government Can Be a Force for Good. And I think people have forgotten that government can be a force for good because they are so quick to say government is all screwed up. They're all the same. Right. All politicians are the same. And I often say, no, that's not the case. And actually by saying that, by painting them with the same broad brush all the time, you take them all off the hook. You say, oh, we expect nothing from them. These guys are all going to be shills that do nothing for us. When in fact, there are a lot of wonderful people who go into government. Tim Walz is a perfect example, right? Who are out there doing it for the right reasons at the right time. I mean, it's not like we can't see from the Republican Party's increasing acceptance of things like white supremacy, the violence of January 6th, the name calling, the constant name calling, the debasement of our politics, even just their continued support of the felon Donald Trump as their standard bearer, right? Like, this is not the same party as what's going on with the Democrats. They don't stand for the same things. They're not the same action. I mean, you point out in the book that the Republicans have long leaned on what you were saying earlier, this historical branding, right? Who they are. They've long leaned on that ideal of who they are to give themselves a permission structure to behave antithetically to everything they say they stand for, right? You point out, like, here you have this group of people who claim to stand firmly in family values, in Constitution, in freedom, and yet their behavior undermines those principles every single time. And all you have to do is look at people who really stood up for classic conservative values, your Mitt Romneys, your John McCains, even Republican scions like Liz Cheney, or old school Republicans like Paul Ryan. They're gone, right? They're out of the party. It's only MAGA now, and MAGA has no relationship to those old principles. So we should really stop allowing them to hold the mantle of the grand old party, or even the Republican Party at all, because I say it all the time, if you're a classic Republican, you didn't leave the party left you.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point. Not everybody on the right feels like they have some obligation to conform to like what this new party has become. I do a show with Tim Miller on my YouTube channel called Inside the Right. And the whole point of that show is expressly to ensure that people on the right, people who are independents, conservative Democrats, recognize that this isn't just an instance where you have no choice but to just head over to what the Republican Party has become now, that it kind of gives a permission structure for these conservatives to recognize that you don't have to go cast your ballot for Donald Trump, that there is a faction of you out there who recognize how dire the situation has become on the right, and that if you want to see that party reform itself in some actual way, then the only way to do that is going to be to make sure that they don't succeed as they're running right now. And so the goal of our show really is to make sure that Republicans have something of a permission structure to know that there is a broad community of them out there. And a lot of them are standing up more and more to say basically that we're not going to take lying down what's being handed to us by this MAGA Republican Party.
And for people who don't know, Tim Miller is the host of The Bulwark. He's a classic conservative. He's worked within that world. And so Brian is doing a your side, my side thing where we show that actually we're on the same side quite frequently.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. We're seeing the Arizona Republicans now coming out and saying we cannot support Donald Trump. This isn't our values. It isn't who we stand for. We're seeing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints coming out and saying the same thing. These are people that are classic R beside your name people. And I've often said, how devoted are you to that R? Are you so devoted that you would give away your freedoms? Are you so devoted you would give away your children's freedoms, your daughter's freedoms, that you want, children working in factories and an authoritarian government? Is the R that important to you that you're willing to give away so many things? But I think people get caught up in these, as you call them, these artificial slogans, these hollow catchphrases, the gaslighting. We often say that Republicans are excellent at branding because they are. Build the wall was good branding. Lock her up was good branding. I mean, completely fascistic, but easy to remember and fun to say, right? So you point out the reality and, quite frankly, the danger of what they say versus what they do. And I've been finding it interesting lately because it seems like the Republican candidates, particularly Donald Trump himself, keep saying exactly what they plan to do. And people don't believe them because they're so caught up in kind of the gaslighting.
Yeah, and I think Democrats are finally learning, after hearing Republicans both wield these phrases and repeat them so often, Democrats are finally learning how to fight back in that arena. I mean, "we're not going back" is an especially effective catchphrase that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have adopted. They know to repeat it at these speeches over and over and over again. And it's becoming more potent than even the phrases that Donald Trump was wielding for years. And that's owed in large part to the fact that that whole shtick is tired at this point. People are just exhausted about the fact that they have to continue chanting, "build the wall," for somebody who was in office for 4 years and didn't manage to build the wall, or promised that Mexico was going to pay for building the wall. And guess what? Mexico didn't pay for the wall. Our taxpayer dollars did. And then just, if you really want to dive into the locker up of it all, Now the guy who would be leading that chant of lock her up is a 34-time convicted felon who's still waiting prosecutions in 3 other trials and may very well be sentenced to be locked up himself on September 18th for the New York prosecution. So I think even he recognizes the irony in leading chants of lock her up at this point, and doesn't exactly land the same way. So good on Democrats for finally recognizing that we should have, catchphrases, which are not the equivalent to, but share some features of what the right has done. Certainly, we want to not be the direct equivalent, but be a more virtuous equivalent of that. And in the book, I write about how Al Franken, a joke he used to tell is what Democrats do is they'll have their bumper stickers and their first bumper sticker ends with continued on next bumper sticker. And that's how it's been. Like when we're talking about the virtues of our healthcare plans and we start delving into the intricacies of Medicare Part D, you've lost people. And like that's how it's been for Democrats for so long. Republicans are out there wailing, lock her up, build the wall, and the entire world knows it. And Democrats are like, this healthcare plan is great, and you have different factions, and we have people on Medicare who are right now trying to help with but it's only Medicare recipients for $35 inhale. It's like that when you're explaining, you're losing. But when you come out and you say, we're not going back, make sure women have freedoms, what we're selling now is so much easier to understand. It's so much more resonant with the American people. Our goal is to just keep it on one bumper sticker here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I used to say that if the Democrats had come up with the Coke slogan, Coke is it, it would have been Pepsi isn't it because there are other soda companies that are better, but let me explain how it breaks down. And then you're like, I'm gone. You lost it. You lost it. It really does need to be Coke is it sometimes. And honestly, why I started my rants was to give people information in bite-sized digestible pieces so they can really absorb it. I think you and I have long been on the same page that no matter how it seemed to be going, this return to Trump was not inevitable, but it was essential that people knew the truth. And that, like you were saying, people like us out here in the independent media world, we're giving the public the correct information, not just of the facts, but how things were going and how much of a threat Trump and his entire ilk really were to America. That if we were going to fix things, it was important that we acknowledge the truth of our current political culture and sort of keep repeating the idea that this man, this criminal, rapist, traitor that Trump really is, the idea that he could even hope to come back into power speaks to the trouble our democracy is facing right now. And I think that we have to still remember that even as the political winds seem to be shifting right now, that the fact that he's even their nominee is in itself a problem that we need to acknowledge.
And I think too that there has to be an understanding and an acceptance from Americans more broadly that because Trumpism is now in the zeitgeist, and because the mantle will be picked up inevitably by the J.D. Vances of the world, by the Tucker Carlsons and Don Jr.'s and Marjorie Taylor Greenes, James Comers, Jim Jordans, Lauren Boeberts, this isn't going to go away if Donald Trump loses. And so I know that it feels like, we always hear the expression, well, I already voted in 2020. I was told that was the most important election of our lifetimes. And then I came out and I voted in 2022 because you told us that was the most important election of our lifetimes. And now we're going to come out in 2024 because we're being told right now that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And here's the thing. It is, and it will continue to be in every subsequent election. And once we accept the fact that voting is not the end goal, but just has to be a part of our lives, that we only have democracy so long as we continue to fight for it. Once we accept that, then it becomes easier because you know that you just have to vote every 2 years. You have to come out every single time. Every election will be the most important election of our lifetimes because every election will be, again, putting us on the precipice of teetering between what Democrats are selling, which is a continued embrace of democracy, and what Republicans are selling, which is a descent into authoritarianism, because that's what they're looking for. The veil is off. They don't want democracy. When you have these self-proclaimed constitutionalists and originalists and textualists on the U.S. Supreme Court, the Clarence Thomases and Samuel Alito's and Neil Gorsuch's and Amy Coney Barrett's and Brett Kavanaugh's of the world, who are making up out of whole cloth new provisions of the Constitution that say that a president is akin to a king in this country, which is completely antithetical to the whole point of what America is and the founding of this country as we escaped a monarchy. then the veil has fully been lifted, and you can tell that these people are not interested in democracy. So it has to be a fight at every single election cycle. And once we accept that, it becomes easier to recognize that it's okay that every election is the most important election of our lifetimes, because we're prepared to fight every single time. And by the way, we have the numbers. More people showed up in 2020 for Joe Biden than did for Donald Trump. And that included a coalition of longstanding Republicans. It included a coalition of independents. It included a vast number of young people who are voting in numbers that they haven't voted in before. So we have that coalition. Our job is just to make sure that people know that every single time we have to be able to come out and vote, because every single time it's going to be just as important as it was the last time, and democracy will be on the line, but that we have the numbers to protect it.
Yeah, we definitely have the numbers to protect it. I mean, it's one of those things that it's like, we were so busy living in a democracy that we forgot we had to work on our democracy. And
Right.
I think that's the thing. I often equate America and democracy to a couple in a long-term marriage, where in your long-term relationship, you're like, that person will always be there for me. And I think people thought American democracy would always be there for them. And this is a moment where you say, geez, we have to put in the effort. We have to keep reinvesting in this relationship. We have to do the work to make it work. And I think that's where we are now. I mean, you point out in the book that the problem in many ways is that the fourth estate, the people that are supposed to keep us accountable and let us know what's going on, in this case, the mainstream media, has proved itself to be what you call a willing participant in this ongoing farce. And I would say the ongoing farce is that the Republican Party is still a legitimate party, that Donald Trump is a legitimate candidate. And they've been particularly problematic since the rise of MAGA, because honestly, it's a tremendous moneymaker for them. So would you mind speaking a little bit about that?
I think there has been clearly the mainstream media has dropped the ball in terms of knowing how to cover Donald Trump, in terms of knowing how to cover Republicans. I think the way the Republicans have learned how to game the refs is so obvious in this country. They know that the mainstream media wants to be palatable for everybody. And so the right will continuously refer to the mainstream media as being the liberal media, knowing that if they do that, then they can get the mainstream media to basically bend over backwards to prove to everybody that it's not liberal. For example, they will overcompensate to the nth degree, and in the 2016 election, they'll run 69 cover stories on the New York Times to show that Hillary's emails is now the greatest national security threat that America's ever faced, which, by the way, was completely undermined when you had Ivanka Trump, who used a personal email address to conduct government business, and it came and went like a fart in a hurricane. But they will continuously bend over backwards to try and show that they're in fact not liberal, and that basically confers all of this power to the right, because now the right has become the assignment editors for everybody in the mainstream media, because the mainstream media needs to show, we need to prove, we need to bend over backwards that we're not liberal. And so look how conservative we can be. Look how much deference we'll pay to the right. And it doesn't gain them any goodwill, because the right will continuously call CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post fake news. So it never benefits them to the way that they want to be benefited in the end. But still, they never learn their lesson, though. They never say, oh, look, we're not gaining any goodwill. The right continuously calls us fake news, even when we write stories that were perpetuated by the Republican Party itself, and yet we'll just keep doing it. It's like, how many times does Charlie Brown have to try to kick the football before he realizes Lucy's going to pull it away every time? And we're apparently not there yet. I think that's why independent progressive media is so important, because we have no allegiance to some Republican Party that's acting in bad faith. We're not trying to get Republicans to come on the air. I've tried to get Republicans to come on my show. It's not happening. It just doesn't happen. And so that's fine. I've come to terms with the fact that when I email Matt Gaetz's office, that I'm not going to get a response back. I've come to terms with the fact that when I email any of these people's offices, they're not coming on. So if they don't want to come on, that's fine. I'm happy to just use my platform anyway to report to people. But I think this notion that we have to operate in such a way that takes into account access before anything else, and so we have to comport ourselves in such a way that will preserve that access to people who are acting in bad faith anyway, is completely backwards. And yet that's the formula we see employed over and over and over again from mainstream media. And it's particularly troubling because what the Republican Party is selling today is a descent into autocracy. What do you think happens to a free press if we become an autocracy, an authoritarian
nation? Honest to God,
nation?
thank you. It's so it's like they're destroying themselves, and it's like they don't even see it.
Absolutely. Like, we're all on this plane together. And so the media should be self-interested here because an authoritarian party has no need for a free press. They're often the first ones to go. And so they are just helping the Republican Party basically condemn them to obscurity. There should be a bias in favor of democracy. I get that the media doesn't want to be perceived as biased, but it is okay to be biased in favor of democracy. That is the system of government that makes a free press possible. And so, like I said before, we're all on this plane together. If this plane goes down, the media goes down with it. And yet, for some reason, they're just not able to wrap their head around that.
Yeah, no, it is something to watch because you're saying the first thing to go in an authoritarian regime is always the free press. They don't need 17 news stations. They need one RT. They need one US TV, and it's probably going to be Fox. So they really haven't done themselves any favors. They've also made it so that facts themselves now appear to be liberal. You know, if you just report the facts, it seems like you're giving some liberal bias, whereas that's just an actual fact. And we've forgotten what facts are in our desire to spin it so we look like we're giving both sides of a story. There aren't both sides of is the planet warming, right? Like there aren't both sides. There is the thing that 99% of world scientists agree, and then there is an outlier. But that shouldn't be presented as both sides of the same story. So, having been in so many hotel rooms lately, I've decided that my bedroom windows need an update. Blinds really change the look of a room, and I think we can do better at the McGowan House. Which is why I'm thrilled that the show is now sponsored by 3 Day Blinds, because I did it myself every other time, and this time I think I'm going to need some help. 3 Day Blinds are the leading manufacturer of custom window treatments in the US. They have local, professionally trained design consultants with an average of 10 plus years experience to provide expert guidance on the right blinds for you from the comfort of your own home. You just set up an appointment and you will get a free, no obligation quote the same day. And the experts at 3 Day Blinds handle everything. They design, measure, and install your new blinds so you can just sit back and let the pros do the work. No buying the wrong length or having them not fit. Check out their Instagram. You will see right away how nice their stuff is, and 3 Day Blinds has been putting out consistently high-quality product for 45 years, which is probably why they're the highest-rated blinds company on Trustpilot. No matter your specific needs, if it's motorization, home automation, room darkening, or child safety blinds, 3 Day Blinds have thousands of options that will fit in any budget or style, with actual samples so you won't have to be guessing what your blinds will look like, which, let's be honest, most of us have really done over the years. And when it comes to home renovations, we all have questions. What blinds are going to fit these arched windows? What are better, roller or Roman shades? No matter your questions or specific windows, 3 Day Blinds is ready to help you out. Right now, you can get 3 Day Blinds, buy one, get one 50% off custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no charge, no obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. That's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. One last time, that is the number 3, DAY, blinds.com/politicsgirl. And that promo code is politicsgirl for 50% off your first order, plus free shipping. So summer can be tough on our skin. If you have dry skin or you burn easily, then the summer's a tough time for you. Though I think if we're being honest, I'm sure most of our skin could use a little TLC at this time of year. It's one of the reasons I like OneSkin. All of their products are created by skin longevity scientists and lab and clinical studies, so you know they work. And we're not just talking about surface benefits either. OneSkin's OS1 peptide targets the zombie cells that cause lines, wrinkles, and sagging skin. It's scientifically proven to reverse the skin's biological age at the cellular level. So whether you're laying out at the beach, or you're hiking, or you're heading out on vacation, OneSkin's OS1-powered sunscreen blocks UV rays while targeting the UV-induced skin aging you already have. It's the sunscreen I've been using all summer, and I'm excited about their new limited edition bundles called Summer Skincare Essentials that include their daily moisturizers and their broad spectrum sunscreens for the face and body. There's a reason why OneSkin was named to Fast Company's list of the world's most innovative companies in 2024. Treating the symptoms rather than the root cause of aging has long been the norm. Most skincare available on the market is designed to provide a temporary reduction in visible signs of aging, addressing the surface symptoms of an underlying decline in skin health. OneSkin is more than skincare. It's about skin longevity, targeting the root cause of aging to help you look and feel your best at every age. Get started today with 15% off using the code PoliticsGirl at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code PoliticsGirl. And after your purchase, if they ask you where you heard about them, please support our show and tell them that we sent you. It's time to expect more from your skincare routine. Invest in the health of your skin with OneSkin. So I've come to realize that I don't eat that well during the day, but I know I have to put something in my body to keep my brain functioning. And I found that Mosh bars have become my favorite go-to. The older I get, the more I find myself wanting to be more intentional about the way I eat and take care of my body. Now, you may have heard of Mosh on Shark Tank. Mosh is a company founded by Maria Shriver and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger with a simple mission: to create a conversation about brain health through food, education, and research. Mosh joined forces with the world's top scientists and functional nutritionists to make something beyond your average protein bar. With 10 delicious flavors, including 3 that are plant-based, each Mosh bar is made with ingredients that support brain health, like lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. Mosh bars also come with a brand new look and formulation, featuring the first and only brand boosted with cognizin, a premium neurotropic that supplies the brain with a patented form of acetylcholine. So, in normie speak, brain boosters. And here's the best part. Mosh donates a portion of all proceeds from your order to fund gender-based brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, and Mosh is working closely to close that gap between men and women's health research. I'm always going on and on about their lemon and white chocolate flavor, but honestly, they're all good. My boys love the cookies and cream and the chocolate peanut butter crunch. So if you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and brain, Mosh bars are the perfect choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/politicsgirl to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestseller trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers or plant-based trial pack at moshlife.com/politicsgirl. Thank you, Mosh, for sponsoring this episode. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested, so buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of a variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber 8x8 and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/PGP. That's oracle.com/PGP. oracle.com/PGP. There aren't both sides of is the planet warming, right? Like there aren't both sides. There is the thing that 99% of world scientists agree, and then there is an outlier. But that shouldn't be presented as both sides of the same story.
Right. I actually think it's quite pernicious. And Republicans are not necessarily trying to get people to believe in something in particular, in some specific claim that they're making. I think that they're just trying to make the truth itself so distant. Like they're trying to obfuscate the whole truth altogether. I mean, this is the Steve Bannon model of flooding the zone with shit, that there is no truth. And so once people become confused and untrusting of everything, that is basically priming us to fall into an authoritarian state. That is how fascists take over, when people don't know who to believe. And so I think that's a big part of what we're seeing. And that's why Republicans lean so heavily on cheap fakes and manipulations. And we're seeing a ton of AI manipulated images these days and deep fake deceptive videos these days, because it's not necessarily that they're trying to get them to believe what those videos or those clips or those images are portraying, but they do want to kind of undermine our trust in everything, because then that creates an environment where they can swoop in and say, just attack the very concept of truth. And when we don't know what's true or what's false altogether, then they can try to fill that void with their iteration of the truth. And that really does appeal to demagogues like Donald Trump.
Yeah. And then again, it brings back the importance of the rise of independent media in this nation and how essential it is that there's certain groups of us out here consistently trying to give people the real story because we aren't being told by some corporate overlord, what we're allowed to call, what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to do. We're allowed to take all the information out there and say, here's what the real story is. I mean, let me ask you, you're a contributor at a major network. Do you see a difference in how you're allowed to speak or how you can bring the news or a story between your own work online and the traditional mainstream media?
No, actually, that's been great. So I started with MSNBC about a year and a half ago. I do on-air appearances and I do digital content. And there's been zero difference in terms of what I'm able to say on my own channel versus what I'm able to say on MSNBC. And I think that's to their credit because, look, they didn't hire me so that they can get me to do something other than what I do. We should be applauding the fact that for as many issues as we have with the mainstream media, that the last thing I want to do is say like, let's just give up on it. Look, there are people there who get their news, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who get their news from mainstream media. And so I would rather make sure that my perspective can be told than just giving up on mainstream media altogether. I have a lot of qualms with the both sides media, but I think when you have a network that is working to make sure that progressives have a perspective, I mean, you spoke about Lawrence O'Donnell at the top of this episode right here. I think that's especially important, and we should reward that for as much as we condemn when mainstream media does something bad. And so, it's to MSNBC's credit that they've given me the opportunity to reach a different audience in terms of who's watching that network. And I think the more people who can be kind of unapologetically progressive on mainstream media and bring that perspective, I think it's going to ultimately benefit us in the end.
Yeah, and it's a credit to that network that they would put you on and not give you any parameters. I think that does make a lot of sense. And it's probably one of the reasons that is the network that most people rely on. Now, to get back to your book, you were kind of digging into the heart of the Republican Party's, current dysfunction. And you ended up speaking to a lot of leaders and experts in their field. You were just talking about Al Franken. You talked to Jamie Raskin, who also wrote the foreword to your book. You spoke to presidential cabinet member and Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, journalists like Mehdi Hasan and Jen Psaki, Democratic expert and super lawyer who I just love, Mark Elias, and then, of course, the always brilliant Heather Cox Richardson and media expert Dan Pfeiffer. So you took all these amazing people and you integrated their experience into your book. So talk to me about some of the wisdom you were able to glean from these incredible voices.
Yeah, so I mean, I was so fortunate to be able to talk to these people. These are people who've shaped my opinions on everything in politics. I think something that a little bit of wisdom that Jen Psaki was able to impart was to be able to speak to people in a way that we can all relate to. I think Democrats do have a tendency to speak in such a way that's a little bit uppity and off-putting and not necessarily super relatable. So to speak in terms that people are able to very clearly understand, I think is one bit that Democrats should take moving forward. And we've been very good at that. I mean, look, at this point, when our ticket is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, two middle-class kids who grew up, you have Tim Walz was a football coach and a high school social studies teacher, Kamala Harris, a prosecutor putting away, con men and frauds like Donald Trump, and then you contrast that with the Republican ticket, which is J.D. Vance, a funded by Silicon Valley billionaires who went to Yale, and you've got Donald Trump who lived in a gold-plated mansion at the top of a tower in New York City. I think that kind of the calculus has flipped in terms of which party is able to speak to regular people at this point. So that's been to the credit of the Democratic Party and their recognition of the audience that we're looking to speak to right now, which is a middle class, working class audience. That's who Democrats work for, and we've been able to put into practice a lot of the ways that we can actually better communicate with them now. Al Franken had the great one that I spoke about before, which is continued on next bumper sticker. And that is just basically to convey the importance of making sure that our messages are simple, because for so long, Democrats have been the party that doesn't know how to message. And I think now we're finally recognizing that while we're out there saying women should have reproductive rights, period, that climate change is important to confront, period, that we're not going back to a time of Donald Trump and all of the mayhem that ensued, period. Those are really smart, concise, effective messages. And then you look at what's happening on the right, where Donald Trump has these rambling 90-minute stream of consciousness diatribes where he bounces from advocating for Hannibal Lecter, to complaining about windmills, to lamenting the water pressure, sharks and batteries, the water pressure in his toilet and shower. Like, I think it's pretty clear who's winning the messaging battle right now. And who is just, the problem with hitching your wagon to a guy who is not only in the throes of cognitive decline, but even on a good day is just an abject moron, is that when he says, when he spews his inanity, and you have no choice but to line up behind him and say, you know what, I do think it's important that we discuss Hannibal Lecter. I do think it's important that we talk about water pressure in toilets because dear leader said it, and now we have no choice. And you know what? Maybe it was, in fact, Jeb Bush that got us involved in the war in the Middle East. And these people who perceive themselves as serious people have to go on air and explain away the utter bullshit that Donald Trump spews because some errant synapse fired in his brain and some random word fell out of his mouth, and then that becomes gospel in the Republican Party. And all of these people have to go on TV and answer for it, and they do every single time, and the whole thing is just so sad. And that's a pretty clear distillation of where the messaging in politics is today, that when you have to answer for this clown of a leader in Donald Trump, and you have to, again, take as sacrosanct every word that falls out of his face, you're left in a position where you're really trying to defend the indefensible. And finally, one other bit of wisdom I think that was especially important was what Mark Elias told me. And that was, he told a great story, and I recounted it in the book, about a Jewish soldier in World War II. And I won't go into it because I do want to preserve it. But I think the long and short of it is, there was a soldier during World War II who did his small part to make sure that he fought back against the Nazis in what small way he could. And it almost felt futile and unnecessary and almost laughable at some points. But I think it was a really great story in terms of showing the agency that we have as Americans right now. And a story that I like to tell is that in Wisconsin in 2020, which is very often the tipping point state, and you and I know Wisconsin well, you and I traveled out to Wisconsin in an event that was organized by Ben Wickler and the amazing Wisconsin Democratic Party. That state is near and dear to both of our hearts. The difference in 2020 between a Biden win and a Trump win was 2 votes per precinct. That's all it would have taken for Donald Trump to win in the tipping point state. And so if there was any doubt about the extent to which we have agency in politics, all we have to do is find 2 people, and that could have the power to flip an election in the most important state in the country. So find 2 people in your life, for example, who wouldn't have voted, who aren't interested in politics, who may be misinformed because they get their news from Facebook, or they're subscribed to Dan Bongino, or the algorithm is feeding them misinformation, or they listen to both sides media that tries to equate, Democrats misplacing a modifier with Republicans trying to thrust us into the throes of autocracy. And so there are people out there, I have them in my own family, and there are people who are ripe for the taking and ripe for persuasion. And if you can make those 2 people in your life your responsibility, that could very well be the difference between protecting democracy and sliding toward authoritarianism.
Yeah. And I know the story you're speaking about because I've spoken to Mark on this show. And you're right, it does deserve to be read in its entirety. It is excellent. And it does tell everybody sort of how important our own little voices are and what we can do in our own way, in our own homes, with our own people to really make a difference. And tell me if you think this is true. I feel like the political winds are shifting right now. I mean, since the Democratic change in ticket. And I feel like you and I have been on the same page for a long time, where we felt hope, even though most people couldn't see it. And we were working towards making people understand that this sort of spiral down the drain, as you call it, back to Trump, was not inevitable. And I think we're recognizing, and I think more people are recognizing now, what these huge Harris Walls rallies are showing us. And that's the majority of the country isn't up for this authoritarian nightmare. But it's always going to take a tremendous amount of effort and willpower to both shift the narrative and shift the sort of voting that happens in this country. Because a lot of people don't even vote. They just don't think it's necessary, right? that if we want to bring the country back together, it's definitely not impossible. It's just going to take a lot of hard work. But I don't think it hurt that we've got this influx of hope now with this new candidate and her chosen running mate and the joy we're feeling again. I think we all were feeling quite oppressed for so long. I don't think the weird thing hurt either. But
Yeah.
I feel like there is a political shift of winds. Are you feeling that?
Oh, I mean, even I understated the importance, the significance of hope in politics. And, it's been so long since we had it. And I think the last time anybody really felt it to this degree was in 2008. And look, in 2008, you had the unlikeliest of candidates who wielded hope to such a strong degree that as a junior senator, an unknown politician who was Black in America, with big ears, middle name was Hussein, was able to win not just one election by the biggest margin in U.S. history, but 2 elections back to back, is a testament to the effectiveness of hope. And we obviously didn't have that in 2016. Hillary Clinton wasn't able to wield that to the same degree. And of course, the circus that was Donald Trump was kind of took all of our eyeballs anyway. And so that kind of sucked up all the oxygen in the room. And then 2020 was largely about just ending Trumpism. I mean, Joe Biden was never this brilliant orator. He was a wonderful president. He continues to be a wonderful president, the most progressive president of our lifetimes, the most accomplished president of our lifetimes. But he didn't win because he had some Barack Obama style like oration. He wasn't able to wield that same degree of hope that Obama did. But I think we're seeing that now, and we kind of forgot the potency of that as a tool. And the fact that Kamala Harris came in and was having these great rallies and was able to speak and prosecute the case and fill people with hope, she immediately got endorsements from a ton of musicians and artists and Republicans and young people. And you can't fake that. I mean, these people were around when Joe Biden was running a couple months ago. And they recognized the threats to democracy just a couple of months ago. But the fact that they're coming out now goes to show that there's another ingredient in this that was missing that you need. And you can't fake it. You can't buy it. You can't manufacture it. It has to come organically, and it's coming organically right now. And it's the difference. It's the difference maker in these elections, and it is the reason why so many people are coming out. It's the reason why the polls are shifting so dramatically. It's the reason why you have Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion, and hopefully soon Taylor Swift come out and endorse Kamala Harris. It's the reason why Gen Z voter registration is surging right now. It's the reason why she gained $310 million in just the last month, which is more than double what Donald Trump raised, and it's the most that any candidates raised in political history. So again, you can't fake this stuff, and it goes to show that you need it in these elections, because you can try to educate people to the ends of the earth, and I know you do, and I try to do the same, but you do need something else, and there is an emotional aspect of this, and without that emotional appeal, without somebody's passion and competence and charisma, you're just not going to be able to get over the finish line. You can get 9/10 of the way there, but you need that extra bump, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is I'm seeing a lot of I told you so's from those who were pushing to get Joe Biden out of the race now. Like people like me who had the president's back all along, they believe that I should be apologizing, and people like me should be apologizing and thanking them for this amazing new ticket. And I think it was actually essential that there were so many of us in the base who really held firm in our support for Joe Biden and President Joe Biden and the candidacy of Joe Biden, and felt the responsibility of holding the line for our candidate, because I think it allowed Joe Biden to go out on his own terms and have the support of the base behind him when he picked his VP as the heir apparent. It was really this groundswell of grassroots support that truly solidified Vice President Harris as the nominee before anyone else could get their hat in the ring. And I think that was an important thing. I think that everyone played their part in getting us to where we are now. But I think the credit for the successful passing of the torch belongs firmly with President Biden. And I think people can see now that he's not the nominee, what a wonderful and successful president he's really been, even if he's not a great candidate. It's a completely different animal. And I honestly think he's going to go down as one of the best presidents we've ever had. But I love this idea of starting a new phase of American politics with politicians who aren't in it for themselves, but are in it for the people. And I feel like that's what we're seeing from Kamala Harris and from Tim Walz. And I kind of have to say, we have to be honest to the people who were truly, in my opinion, shivving the President Biden in the back. Those people weren't looking to follow him up with Kamala Harris, no matter what they're saying now. And I believe the whole pass the torch thing was supposed to bypass her, but the base and the people had other plans. And I think it's just such a great reminder of the power of the people in this country. And I think people forget, including the people in charge, that the American people really do have so much power in our country when we support democracy, when we pay attention, when we're engaged in the process. And I think it's just a wonderful wake-up call for all of us of how much our voices really matter.
Right. I think that's exactly right. Look, if you're looking for a testament to the fact that we have agency, it's that the fact that we were so quick to rally behind Kamala Harris. I mean, it happened within 36 hours, maybe, where the whole thing was
less.
starting.
Honestly, I think they'd raised $100
finishing.
million in 24 hours. Like, it was bananas.
So look, if you're looking for another proof point about the extent to which Americans have agency, just look at the fact that Kamala Harris was able to come in and get all of that support immediately, become the Democratic nominee, and now we're in the position that we're in. But we continue to have that agency. We continue to be able to wield it when we go out to the polls in November, and we shouldn't forget like the power that we have in that respect.
Yeah. So please, before you go, tell people how they can buy your amazing book and they can keep up with your work online. Because honestly, I have it right here Shameless. It's so excellent. And I really want people to read it. It's an easy read. It kind of gets you right into the story of American politics. And it's so engaging because you've got such amazing people to be involved in the book. And there's just such great stories in here. So tell people how they can buy your book, but also how they can follow all your work.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. I'm online everywhere at Brian Tyler Cohen. So I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, every social media platform at Brian Tyler Cohen. And the book is available anywhere you get books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to bookshop.org if you're looking to support independent booksellers, or your local bookseller. That's a great way too. But it's available anywhere right now. And you could just type in Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen and you'll be able to grab it that way. And there's some tough competition because J.D. Vance's book has surged back into the spotlight, and I really would love not to be defeated by J.D. Vance of all people. Neil Gorsuch also has a book out, so if for nothing else, then at least help your fellow progressives and Democrats so that the Republicans don't succeed in yet another media space as they're doing right now. So again, for anybody watching, if you want to grab that book, I'd very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. I can't recommend it more. And I have to say, on the cover of Brian's book is poor little Lincoln up here in the Lincoln Memorial with his hand in his face, just like shaking his head over the state of the country. And I think that's where we need to get back to, a place where Lincoln can sit up straight and not be disappointed in our country. And we don't have to be disappointed in our country either. So thank you so much for coming, Brian.
Lee, it is wonderful talking to you.
I appreciate your work more than I can say.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful talking to you.
So that was Brian Tyler Cohen, showing us why he's such a success in the independent media space. We are currently watching the failures of 2016 being revisited by the mainstream media all over again. So it's absolutely essential at this pivotal moment in history that we support those out here giving us the real story. Those who are in it to provide context and not spin. I hope you'll take the opportunity to check out and hopefully buy Brian's book, Shameless, as he's really written a compelling story about what we, from viewers to Democrats to the media, can learn from this moment in history and where we go from here. I want to thank Brian for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go out and find 2 new voters. Until next week, PG out. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, in partnership with the Meidas Media Network, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.